The Parsha of the week is called Tzav. It's the second Parsha in the book of Leviticus, and it is a very, very thick description of the sacrificial worship, of the sacrifices that took place in the Beit HaMikdash. If you look at the Haftarah, which is really remarkable, that's the 6th and 7th chapter of Jeremiah, which is Jeremiah's attack on the whole sacrificial worship. Because the argument between the priest and the prophet is very the argument between the priest and the prophet is very clear here. The priest who says that the sacrifice is necessary, it is of inherent worth, it is something that God has commanded and God needs, and the world does not continue unless the sacrifice goes forward. The sense that ritual is demanded and there is no choice, that ritual is real. Ritual is not something that we create. Ritual is not a cultural expression. Ritual is real. That's the priest's idea. And ritual needs that. I mean, in order to have, you got to have that sensibility. And even though even though we know that ritual is a cultural creation, we adopt that idea that it's necessary. Think about a birthday party. I mean, what happens to a little kid if you forget to have his birthday party? He goes nuts because ritual is real. Not to have my birthday, it's not to acknowledge that I exist. Not to have a cake with candles. Now, where in the Torah are you told to have cakes with candles? But this is the American custom of a birthday. And if you don't have a cake, and you don't have candles, and you don't sing that silly song, I don't know what people did before that song was written. Cavemen sat around going, happy birthday to you. I mean, the song, David, when was that song written? David Spear, when was that song written?
About 100 years.
Right, what did people do for birthdays before that? Abraham Lincoln had a birthday. What did they sing to him when he was a kid? The Battle Hymn of the Republic. But it's ritual. You see, it's ritual. Ritual are symbols that are symbols of our deepest values, our deepest convictions. In order for ritual to work, it's much like theater. When you sit in the theater, you forget that they are actors and you are an audience, and you enter into the drama. Right? You forget that the actor on the stage is not really Othello, or not really Romeo and Juliet, or not really, a character in a Neil Simon play, but you forget and you adopt the reality of the stage. It becomes real. Ritual has that theater to it. It becomes real. It needs to be real because that's what gives it its power. That's what helps us take it seriously. Right? So the priest represents that myth, that idea that ritual is necessary. So the prophet comes along with a critique and he says, but look, it's necessary because it's a symbol of the inner conviction. What happens when that inner conviction is gone? When you're using the ritual to mask the fact that the inner conviction isn't there. And he looks around at the city of Jerusalem and he sees a faithless city. And he says, your ritual does not represent the attachment of this city and its people to their God. Your ritual is masking the loss of that attachment. You have become an obstacle to that faithful attachment, not an instrument, not an idiom, an expression of it. And that's why the prophet launches an attack on the ritual and he bursts the bubble of the myth. He says ritual is not necessary. It's simply a symbol. And another symbol could work as well. But it's got to work, it's got to be a symbol of something inside. If it's not a symbol of that which is inside, it's not authentic. In fact, it's not only not authentic, it's an insult to God. It's an insult to God. And that conversation between priest and prophet goes on through the course of the Bible. Now, the priests had all the worldly power, so they tortured the prophets. So you don't have too many prophets because who had the guts to get up and say that? But at a certain point, the temple gets destroyed, and the populace is exiled to Babylon. And in Babylon, they're sitting by the waters of Babylon, and they're trying to figure out why this happened. And they recover the words of the prophet. The words of the prophets give them an ideology, a reason, a sort of narrative framework for understanding why we lost our temple. We lost our temple because it ceased to be an expression of our closeness to God and became a mask that covered over our distance from God. Let us rebuild that closeness, and they invent verbal prayer. Verbal prayer then becomes the new symbol of the attachment between Israel and its God. And when we return to Eretz Yisrael and rebuild the temple, you now have two main institutions of worship, synagogues and temple. Temple goes on with sacrifices, but even on the temple grounds, there was a synagogue. There was a synagogue. And when the second temple is destroyed in 70, verbal prayer becomes the principal way that Jews come close to their Creator, the way they worship, they communicate with God. That's a quick history from our Torah portion, right? Now, I gave you all blue prayer books. You got blue prayer books? Open to page 104, please. Everybody okay so far? Okay. Now, this book, those of us who were raised in the Jewish faith, those of us who have learned the Jewish faith, those of us who practice Judaism, those of us who were occasional or regular shul goers, we take this totally for granted. You walk into a synagogue, you open a prayer book, you pray. You expect a service to begin with an announcement, we're going to begin on page 9, or 10, or 11. You expect this to happen. Stop for a moment and don't take this for granted. Number one, why do you need a book of prayers? Why don't you just pray? I mean, think about this for just a friend of mine was on a retreat. A group of college kids went away to the mountains for a weekend Shabbaton. It was like a Hillel thing with a rabbi. And the kid who was supposed to take the crate of prayer books left them in his garage. So they get up, they're at 9 zillion feet on the mountain, and it's Erev Shabbos, and they say to the kid, "Where did you put the prayer books?" And he said, "Oh, shoot. Nope." I thought that was a really interesting. So they looked at each other and they said, "Well, what would we pray if we had no prayer books?" So guess what they did? They sat down in a circle together and they began to sing. And then they went around and everybody said what they're thankful for this week. And everyone went around and said who they'd like to pray for this week. And everyone went around and prayed for and said what they hope for this week. And they sang a few more songs and they finished the service. And they did this all weekend. And they discovered, which is really hard for Jews to do, you don't need prayer books. You can pray without. I've often thought of doing this. I know it like completely freak people out. But I've often thought like maybe on high holidays I might actually do this. Like no, I mean, halfway through the service tell you, close the book. You know what's in the book. I mean, first of all, the stuff in the book you can't read anyway. If you read Hebrew, you can't read it because it's impossible to understand. And if you can understand it, you don't agree with it, right? So close the book. It's a distraction. And just let's talk to God for a while. Let's talk to our own inner selves. Or let's just meditate. Or let's just think about the 4 people in the world you really love most and worry about. Close the book. But we take it for granted. It's here. It's always been here. We're supposed to read the words. Right? So first of all, that's to me, isn't that interesting? I mean, where did you get this from? Right? That's number one. That's the first question. Right? Now the second question is, so not only do we have a prayer book that tells us what to pray, it's huge. I mean, this one's just for Shabbos, and it's how many pages long? It's 700 pages long. I mean, if you count both sides of the page, because they double count, so they fool you. You think you're going through it quicker, But it's really a lot of words. It's an awful lot of words. Like Jews have a lot of words. It's like, if Jeremiah were alive today, he wouldn't criticize sacrifices. He'd wonder why you need so many words. Like, why are you throwing so many words up at God? You know, I have this idea, God's in heaven with a baseball bat, batting them back, So what you see, we take this for granted. So what we have here, if you stop and look at it, is a cultural artifact. This is a cultural artifact. Now, what we have in this cultural artifact is a collection of meditative, contemplative, poetic words about our relationship to God. It's been collected over the last 2,000 years. The reason why there's a lot of words is because we've been around a long time, and we had a lot of wordy Jews. Right? Now, for one thing, I'll tell you this. We never had plastic arts. We never had plastic arts. I mean, the first great plastic artist that you can name who's Jewish is maybe, Jacques Lipschitz or Marc Chagall. Right? We don't have a Rembrandt or a Titian or a Caravaggio or a, Now, the reason for that was twofold. One is because the second commandment said, make no images, so we made no images, right? And two is because we were a portable people. We had to run from place to place. And if you're a portable people, you don't invest in marble. Right? Can you imagine if Michelangelo had been Jewish? Schlepping the David from town to town, where do you want it, you just don't do that, So what we did instead is for every Madonna and child that hangs in the Louvre, there is a poem. We became a literary people. And we invested all of our aesthetic urges and aesthetic creativity into literature. And because we're religious people, we created prayer. And so literally, there is a prayer for every, there is a Jewish version of every Madonna and child that hangs in the Louvre, right? For every Sistine Chapel, there's an Amida. This is our Louvre. This is our art museum. Because what we did was, over the generations, collect the greatest, the deepest, the most beautiful, the most profound, the most interesting, contemplative reflections on faith, and put them not in a museum in Paris, but put them in a book. Now, what happened? The book, the book got really long, so we sometimes we weed it out. We like they do at the Louvre, by the way. You have the main collection, the permanent collection, and then you have special collections. You ever been there? I mean, or any great museum. The Louvre, LACMA does this, They'll have a special exhibition, and you say, where was this stuff? And they say, it's in the basement, From the collections of the Louvre, which means from the basement. Every 30 years we take this stuff out, dust it off, put it up on the wall, let you admire it, then we put it back in the basement again, right? And we do the same thing, right? And there's special collections, just like there's special collections in the Louvre. So you have holiday prayers, and you have Shabbos prayers, you have different kinds of special collections. And that's what this is. So as you're leafing through this book, imagine you're walking through an art gallery. You're walking through an art gallery, and what you're looking at are reflections of the world through the eyes of the greatest Jewish poets who ever lived. Reflections of the world through the eyes of the most sensitive Jewish souls who ever lived, who are trying to understand where they are in the world. And much like a great artist, they're leaving behind for their children and their grandchildren and the people they love a sense of what the world looks like through their special eyes. Right? That's what they're trying to do. How many people in the history of the world have ever painted flowers? Everybody, including my kids. I still have them on the refrigerator door. And yet, we will go all the way to Amsterdam and wait 6 hours in line to watch one crazy Dutch guy named Van Gogh look at his sunflowers. Anyone ever stood in front of a Van Gogh sunflower? A print is good enough. Print is not good enough. A print is beautiful, but a print is a print. Right? I mean, this guy Van Gogh, what a crazy guy. He didn't paint Madonna and Child. He painted his bedroom. The greatest painting ever is his bedroom. Now why? Why is his bedroom, are his tulips or his irises or his sunflowers so remarkable? Because what he saw in a sunflower, we spend a lifetime trying to see. Right? He saw a sunflower as a portal into the life energy of the universe. And if you stand in front of it, that's why it's hypnotic to stand in front of, you need something? It's hypnotic to stand in front of a Van Gogh sunflower because it says, like, why don't you see this? Like, you walk away feeling really silly because you say to yourself, like, why can't I see that? Right? I've looked up at the stars every night of my life and I've never seen what he saw. Right, on Starry Night. Right, exactly right. He never painted anything extraordinary. He paints potato pickers, right? And starry nights and his bedroom and flowers, right? Because he sees it, because the way he sees it is different than anybody else ever. So Rembrandt is much the same. I'll give you my art collection here. Right? Rembrandt did something quite. You always saw the Night Watch, which is a famous. The Night Watch is a standard piece. It was commissioned by a group of middle-class Boy Scouts, basically, to paint their picture. Everyone did this, right? If you got enough money, you got your buddies together, you hired a painter, right? So there was this one group of guys, and they were middle class, and they couldn't afford like the guy who was the best guy in the country, who they really wanted, right? They couldn't afford Franz Hals, so they went to this Rembrandt kid who was like, he was doing okay, but he knew I was going to paint. And and it's a bunch of Boy Scouts. You ever look at the Night Watch, right? Or the Dutch Masters, the Dutch Masters is the city council of some schleppy suburb, Flint, Michigan. They're thirsty. So they're sitting there, and he paints them, and he finds life in them. He finds life in them. That's what we have here. Each one of these prayers is a perception of the universe. And the question to ask as you stand in front of a prayer is, what's the perception of the universe that this particular artist is offering me? That's what the prayer book is asking you to do. Now, you're going to say the following: I can't do that, Rabbi, if you're leading a service at 500 miles an hour. And the answer is, yup. That's a problem. I mean, there's a real contradiction between what the prayer book really asks you to do and what a service asks you to do. And that contradiction is right here on this page. So take a look with me. Ready? So this is early in the service, at the very beginning of the service, right? At the very beginning of the service, we have two meditations, one right after the other. And they have a very interesting contrast between the two. The first one says, they're both very early prayers, by the way. That is 7th, 8th century. Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. The nishma, the breath of everything that is alive, blesses God. So there's this crazy idea in the tradition, and we saw this already in the Torah a couple of months ago when we were started to talk about devotion. That devotion is natural. That it's something that it's inborn. That all of us at a certain point stop the routine of life and we give thanks for the gifts of life. That somehow to be to be alive itself is to be in conversation with the Creator. Right? The idiom of this is very interesting. The name of God in the tradition is Yud He Vav He, which is never to be pronounced according to the rabbis of the tradition. So when we see Yud He Vav He, pardon me, I'm losing my voice. When we see Yud He Vav He, we say Adonai. But Adonai is not spelled Yud He Vav He. Adonai is Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Yud He Vav He is a name which occurs in the Bible, but we don't know how it's ever pronounced. And if you look, by the way, there are vowels under it, but the vowels don't belong to Yud He Vav He. The vowels under the word Yud He Vav He belong to Adonai. They just move the vowels over. So Yud He Vav He, which is God's name, it's some kind of conflation of the word was, is, and will be. But there's actually a very simple way to look at it, right? There's a very simple way to read it. Yud He Vav He is the sound of the human breath. I mean, what's the sound of a Yud? Ya. The He is, Vav is Va or Wa in the old days. And another He is So Yud Hey Vav Hey. Say it. Good. Keep saying that for the rest of the hour. Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha. The breath, or every breath of everything that lives, is pronouncing God's name, which is to say that every breath of life itself is a connection with life universal. That all things are connected, all life is connected because all life itself is drawing from a common source of life. Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha. Every breath of everything that lives is alive. Now, this author is going to mimic a biblical form and repeat the same idea in different words. Veruach kol basar, and the breath or the wind or the spirit, meaning spiritus or respiration of everything that is alive, of everything, of all flesh. Tifaer v'tiramem zichercha malkeinu tamid. Exalts you, praises you, God, always. Mina olam ve'at olam ata'el, from time immemorial till time immemorial you are God. Umi baladecha ein lano melech gogel Moshiach. And besides you, got nothing else. You're the source of it all. So this idea that the author puts forth is that at the core of reality, there is a center of energy and life and giving and love. That's the core of reality, and all of us who live draw energy from that. And by living and breathing, we give back thanks for that. That's what we acknowledge in prayer. And that prayer is the most natural thing in the world, because not only do we pray, Nishmat kol chai, everything that's alive is praying. Everything that's alive is praying. If you got up in the morning early enough, and you could get yourself quiet enough, you could hear the trees davening. And you could hear the birds davening. And you can hear the grass praying. And you can hear the whole planet waking up to pray. Because everything is connected to that source of being in the midst, in the center of the universe. That's how natural and easy prayer is, says this prayer. Prayer is the easiest thing in the world. All you got to do is breathe. You get up in the morning and, yes, I am alive. Life is a gift. Amen. Let's have breakfast. Now, that's one perception. Ready? Here comes the exact opposite perception in the very next paragraph, because this is how the editors of the prayer book put it together. Now, you're in my gallery, right? So what's in the first painting in my gallery? Yosemite Valley, Ansel Adams. How's that? Is that a good prayer piece? How's that? That's a piece of prayer. Have you ever seen Ansel Adams photographs of Yosemite? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Ansel Adams photographs of Yosemite Valley or Vincent van Gogh's sunflowers. That's prayer. How's that? What if we put that on the wall of the new synagogue? Who's building this thing? Where's one of my officers here? We'll put that on the wall. All right, good. We'll take the entire building fund and buy a Van Gogh. Take the entire building fund and buy the frame that goes around the Van Gogh. But what if you walked into shul and that's what you saw? You saw a 25-foot Ansel Adams print. Wouldn't that be something? Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha. Wow. All right, now, ready? Here's the next one. Ready? Here's the next one. Ilu pilu malei shira kayam. If our mouths were as full as song as the sea. So go down to the ocean and stand by the waves and listen to the crashing of the waves. Right? So if I could make that sound, okay? If you're with little kids, by the way, this is the coolest prayer in the world to do. Because, okay, make the sound of the ocean, right? Ulshonenu rinaka hamon galav. And our tongues as filled with song as the great waves. Usfatenu shevach kamarchivei rakia. and our lips as wide as the openness of the sky, v'yadenu pshishot k'nishrei shamayim, and our arms as broad as the eagle's wings, v'raglenu kalot ka'ayalot, and our legs as fast as deer. Ein anachnu maspikim lahodot lacha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elahei avotenu, ulevarech et shimcha lachat me'elef alfei avrei pamim hatovot shasite im avotenu imanu. We could not, how do they translate this? We could, ein anachnu maspikim, we would not be able lahodot lacha, to thank you, to acknowledge you, God of our ancestors, or to praise your name for 1/100 millionth of all the good things you've done for us. Which means what? If you had all of the expressive powers of nature, you still couldn't find an idiom. You couldn't find the words to say thank you enough. Forget God for a minute. You ever have someone do something for you that was so good, and you say to that person, I couldn't thank you enough. There is no amount, I mean, I'll buy you a gift, I'll buy you that Mercedes-Benz, right? But I couldn't thank you enough. You ever have somebody in your life that you wanted to say that to? I couldn't thank you enough. There is no word to express to you what that meant to me at that moment when I needed that, or that you ever have that feeling? And there's just not any, now what is that like? There's a sense of frustration to it, but there's also a sense of, like, that's it. I mean, there's, it's more than appreciation. It's like, David's a great music scholar. So what's the most exuberant piece of great music ever written? The last movement of Beethoven's Ninth, right? That Song of Joy. Right, Ode to Joy, right? And you got the choir, and you got the fireworks, and you got the Hollywood Bowl. You ever been at the Hollywood Bowl when they played, and the whole orchestra's go. I've sometimes watched orchestras play that, and it must be the greatest piece of music in the world to play, because about halfway through that movement, it seems like the whole orchestra they're just loving this, they're just channeling this, right? What is Beethoven trying to say in that piece?
He couldn't hear it.
Right, but
he was conducting, and the orchestra finished, and he was still conducting, and someone had to tap on the shoulder. We're done.
But what was he trying to say with that piece?
He was channeling his gratitude.
Right. That's why people write symphonies, and that's why they paint sunflowers, and that's why, because you can't say enough. So here you have two reflections on prayer. One which says prayer is the easiest thing in the world to do, and the other which says prayer is impossible. Prayer is the hardest thing in the world to do. It's the easiest thing to do. It's all I got to do is breathe. It's the hardest thing in the world to do, is because when you really think about how completely, remarkably, miraculous your existence is, you could never say thank you. You could never say thank you enough, right? I don't know how many of you have ever, held a child, held your baby or your grandchild. Grandchildren, kids. Have you ever held your grandchildren? You hold the child in your arms and you say to you, there's like no words, right? There's like no words. There's no words moment, right? Now, somewhere between these two poles, between all you need to do is breathe and there are no words, that's where the whole world of prayer fits. So this is the opening. This is the opening movement of the sitter. The opening movement of the prayer service of this cultural document says, look, we're going to try something impossible here, right? We're going to try to put into words that which really doesn't need any words, and we're going to try to put into words that which you can't put into words. And words are really an interesting thing. Now, what gives you the chutzpah to even put this into words? What could give you the chutzpah to put this into words? Well, I'll show you what gives you the chutzpah to put it into words. And that is, words in our faith have a very interesting position. Turn to page 83 now. 83, please. 83. All right, ready? This is a little ditty that occurs just at the beginning of the service. You got to get up really early in the morning to get to shul to hear this one, right? Really, really early. Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. Now, that becomes a phrase, it's a catchphrase in the Talmud. It's a name of God. Baruch she'amar, blessed is the one who spoke, v'haya olam, and a world came into being. How did God create the world? With words. God creates the world with words. Stop and think about that for a minute. What a cool idea. Right? First of all, you and I can't do that, right? You can fall in love with words. You can share ideas with words. You can lift up someone's heart with words. You can run for president with words. But you can't create a world with words, right? I've tried. You ever get home and you're really tired and you just look into the microwave and say, lunch. Garnished elfen, doesn't help. Doesn't happen. Because I can't do that. That's called magic. Magic is when you think you can create realities with words. That's why the classic magical words are abracadabra. Abracadabra is a Hebrew phrase meaning abara kidabara. I will create it as I say it. Right? That's what... You didn't know that? Oh, now you're going to go home and say, what do the rabbis say? He told me what abracadabra means. Aleph, bet, resh, aleph. Avira, I will create. Kaf, dalid, bet, resh, aleph. Kidabira, as I say it. Abira, kidabira, I will create it as I say it. Abracadabra. That means I can do what God can do, create physical realities with words. You can't. You can create illusions. You can't create physical realities. The guy really doesn't saw the lady in half. You really wouldn't want to be in a show where he did, Trust me on this. But what you can do, but we are given, but here's the thing. Baruch she'amar v'haya olam, the name of God is left out of that phrase. It doesn't say Baruch Adonai she'amar v'haya olam or Baruch Elohim. That's what you'd expect it to say. Baruch Elohim she'amar v'haya olam. It doesn't say it. And therefore, it imposes a double entendre on the entire prayer. Baruch she'amar, blessed is anyone who speaks and creates a world. Blessed is anyone who speaks and creates a world. We do create a world using words. We create a social world. We create a network of relationships. We create a network of affiliation and commitments and values. We share ideas using words. Baruch she'amar v'haya olam, blessed is anyone who uses words to create a world. We have God's power to create and ironically to destroy one another using words. Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. Be very careful with your words. They have tremendous creative and destructive power. Baruch hu, blessed be that one. Baruch oseh bereshit. Again, a double entendre. Baruch oseh bereshit. Blessed is God who did creation. But bereshit can also mean a beginning. Blessed is anyone who creates something, who begins something, who initiates something. Baruch omer v'oseh, who says and does. Baruch gozerum kayem. Blessed is God who makes a decree and then carries it out. And blessed is anyone who makes a decision and carries it out. Do you see what's going on here? This is a very clever double entendre. It's okay, Mort, it's okay. It's okay, it's okay, it's all right. It's all right, no, he's got people that are important. It's good. It's just, Mort, you okay? Everything all right? You okay? No? It's okay. The phone's not a problem. Make sure you're okay. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Blessed is... What an interesting day this has been. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Blessed is God or is anyone. Merachem. Merachem is a beautiful word. Rachamim in Hebrew is the phrase that is the word that is used to describe God's principal relationship with the world. Rachamim means love, mercy, grace. It comes from the Hebrew word rechem. Rechem means womb. It's a feminine, it's a motherly love. Womb love, mama love, right? Baruch merachem ala aretz. Blessed is anyone, because you're talking about a world being brought into being, right? So blessed is anyone who brings a world into being and then mothers it into being and loves it. Baruch merachem ala briot, who creates, who brings that, showers that love on creation. Baruch mishalem sachar tov lireav. Blessed is anyone who repays those who give back. Baruch hai la'ad v'kayam la'netzach, Baruch podeo matzil, Baruch shemo. Why are words so powerful? Because words create worlds. And what are we doing in the prayer book? We're about to create a world. We're about to create a world of relationship. It's okay. Baruch is
blessed. How do you bless God?
How do you bless God?
Yes, because
That's very good. That's a very lovely idea. Baruch, there's two wonderful roots or derivations of the word Baruch, right? One is Berech. Berech is knee. When I acknowledge somebody who is in front of me and I want them to know that they are part of me or bigger than me or somebody that I revere, I kneel. We don't kneel, Jews. We don't do this very often. Christians do this an awful lot, right? They're much more limber than we are. But to kneel in front of somebody is to say, you are the center of my life. The one time we do kneel in American culture is a man is supposed to kneel in front of a woman when he asks her to marry him, which is to say, you are the center of my being. You are the center of my universe. I don't know if boys do that anymore. Probably girls kneel. I hope so, you know. The other interesting phrase of the word Baruch is brecha. Brecha means a pool of water. So the image here is we're a desert people, remember? So you're a desert nomad, and you're hot, and you're tired, and you're thirsty, and you see in the distance an oasis, trees. And you approach the oasis, and here is this pool of water, right? And there's trees. What do you do when you get to that pool of water? You kneel down and you drink, and you get refreshed, and you are renewed. Baruch. So think about the word Baruch as both of those, right? I kneel, but I also am refreshed and renewed in your presence. You see? So that's what we get here. So what we have in the beginning of the prayer book are these two statements, right? Now we have to have three statements now. One which says, prayer, you don't need words, just breathe. The other which says, words won't suffice. There are no words. What you're dealing with is bigger than words. And then there's the third one which comes along and says, if the world was created with words, we can find words. We can find words which, even if they can't reach God, at least will reach us. And then what happens is you have a symphony here. This is what we're going to take up next week. You have a symphony. You have a structured set of prayers. This is why the prayer service has to go in a certain order. It begins with a pledge of allegiance, which is the Shema. The Shema is a pledge of allegiance. It's not a prayer. It's not a petition. It doesn't ask for something. It's not a wonder prayer. It's not a gratitude prayer. It's a pledge of allegiance. It's a sense in which you say, I acknowledge a certain kind of universe that I live in. And I live within that universe. Here's the universe that I live in, right? And you, God, or that which I name as God, is at the center of that universe. And it's going to ask us, what is at the center of your universe? Right? And I'm going to suggest to you something that you're going to find very bizarre. We'll do this next week. That the Shema is not a statement, it's a question. It's not, Shema Yisrael. It's, are you listening? Are you listening? Adonai Eloheinu? Do you have a God? Adonai Echad? Is there oneness to you? Is there integrity? Is there integration? Is there some core of unity in your being? It's a question. And it's a question. And the answer to that question is the Pledge of Allegiance. Right? Then I think because the next line's even crazier. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. If you read that as a statement, it says, you will love God. How can you command somebody to love? And how can God command you to love God? What does that mean? You will love. But what if it's instead a question? What do you love? What do you love with all your heart and soul and mind? What do you spend all your time talking and thinking about and walking around? I'm going to suggest to you that the Shema is a great question, and it elicits an answer. And the answer is the first statement of prayer. What is at the core of your being? Who are you? That's what it asks. And then the second piece of our prayer service, which we call Amidah or Shmona Esrei, is a field trip. It's a field trip to Jerusalem. It's a field trip to the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. It's a field trip up to the Mount of the Temple, into the Temple itself, actually into the Holy of Holies itself, where we get to stand face to face with God and share a few words. And those are the two great pieces of the prayer service, and that's going to be next week's conversation. Have a very good week. Take care. Shabbat Shalom.